everything in the first times everything in the second. So x times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. Plus 1 times x. Plus 1 times 5 is 5. Combine like terms. So we get x squared plus 6x plus 5. All right, next one. M times m is m squared. M times 6 is positive 6m. M times negative 4 is negative 4m. Negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. So we get m squared. 6 minus 4 is positive 2m minus 24. The last one, k times k is k squared minus 3k minus 7k plus 21. So like terms, k squared minus 10k plus 21. All right, so now we have to look at these answers and figure out, if I gave you that product, if I gave you this answer over here, how would you factor it back into those? And so if we look, okay, 5. We got that by doing 1 times 5. Where did the 6 come from? 5 plus 1. So it's like, which two numbers multiplied to give me positive 5 and added to give me a positive 6? 5 times 1 is 5, 5 plus 1 is 6. Okay, let's see if it works here. Multiply to a negative 24. Negative 4 times positive 6 is negative 24. When you add them, negative 4 plus 6 is positive 2. Here, if you multiply, negative 7 times negative 3 is 21. Negative 7 plus negative 3 is negative 10. So when we are working on these, we are looking for something, our answer will be something in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. We need two numbers that add to the b, the coefficient in front of x, and they have to multiply to c. So that's what you want to write down in your notes. That's the pattern that we have to look for here. So they have to add up to the middle term, multiply to the constant. So if I'm looking at a problem, x squared plus 7x plus 12, I am asking myself, okay, which two numbers would multiply to give me positive 12 and add to give me positive 7? You need to think of two things that multiply to 12 and add to 7. Okay. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 plus 3 is 7. So those are my two numbers, 4 and 3. So that means when I multiply, or when I write my factored form, it was x plus 4, x plus 3. And just like all the others, we can always check ourselves if we multiply it out. We did x times x is x squared plus 3x plus 4x plus 12, which is x squared plus 7x plus 12. So if you're ever unsure, you can multiply to check your answers. All right, would it matter if you wrote x plus 3, x plus 4? No. In multiplication, the order doesn't matter. You just have to have the two parentheses. I don't care what order they're in. But it is important to put the x, then your number. You don't want to have an x plus 4 and the next one 3 plus x. Go ahead and write them in the same order. All right, so we are just going to practice these. So I am going to try to write out a little bit of work today to kind of show you what we're thinking when we come to these problems. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply multiply to a positive 20 and add to a positive 9. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 plus 4 is 9. So my factored form. Okay, it started with an n squared, so each of them gets half the n, so there were 2 n's, so they each get 1. Then we just put our numbers. It was plus 5, plus 4. So n plus 5, n plus 4. Those are multiplied, so they have to be written side by side. You have to have the parentheses around them because that's what tells us if we're multiplying it out that we would distribute everything. If I look at number 2, I want two numbers that multiply to a positive 18 and add to a positive 9. 3 times 6 is 18, 3 plus 6 is 9. So when we factor, okay, start out with w squared, so there were 2 w's, each of them gets 1. Then my two numbers, we had plus 3, plus 6. So w plus 3, w plus 6. I want you guys to do 3 and 4. So the first one, they have to multiply to the constant. So I need two numbers that multiply 24 and add to the middle number, add to 10. 6 times 4 is 24, 6 plus 4 is 10. So a squared would break into a, they each get half of them. Then one gets 6, and one gets 4. So a plus 6, a plus 4. That plus sign is also important, so you have to have that. All right, number 4, I need two things that multiply to 1 and add to 2. 1 times 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2. So it's y squared, so they each get a y. 1 times 1, so y plus 1, y plus 1. I don't think anyone did, but you could have written that as y plus 1 squared. That would be equivalent since it's the exact same parenthesis. So either way is fine. All right. So set number 2, we're doing the same thing, but you'll notice there is a slight difference on these. The previous problems, they always multiplied to a positive number, right? These, I have some negative numbers. So let's go ahead and look at those. So if I want to multiply to a negative 18 and add to a positive 3. If you're going to multiply to a negative number, that means you have to have a positive times a negative, right? So when I'm looking at this, my n squared will break into n. I know one of these has to be positive and one has to be negative. And when I add them up, I have to get a positive 3, which if they're different signs, they're really subtracting to give me 3. So what numbers would work? Okay. So 6 times 3 is 18. One of those would have to be negative. When I add them, I have to get a positive 3. So the 6 would have to be positive. The 3 would have to be negative. Okay, and I know the 3 is the negative one because if my 6 were negative, what would they add up to? Negative 3. So the bigger one has to get that sign. So it's n, it was a positive 6, so n plus 6, and a negative 3, so n minus 3. So if they multiply to a negative, it's kind of like subtracting to that middle number because the signs are opposite. So in this one, I need two things that multiply to a negative 8 and add to a positive 2. So if they're going to multiply to be negative, I know I have to have a positive and a negative. Is the bigger one going to be positive or negative? Positive, because it's a positive 2 in the middle. So multiply to a negative 8, and really it's like subtracting to 2. What would that be? 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. 4 plus negative 2 is 2. So it's x plus 4, x minus 2. Okay, you guys try 7 and 8 for me. order of those parentheses could be flipped, but the 9 has to be the positive, the 5 has to be the negative. Because if those signs were flipped, they would add up to a negative 4 instead. All right, let's try some more. Try look at number 9. So two numbers that multiply to a negative. The only way to get a negative is if you have a positive and a negative. And they have to add up to a negative 2. So now is the bigger one positive or negative? The bigger one has to be negative. Okay, so they multiply to a negative. We have a positive number, a negative number. Only things that multiply to 3 would be 1 and 3. And in order to add up to a negative 2, it would have to be positive 1, negative 3. A plus 1, A minus 3. Look at 10. Multiply to a negative 30. Add to a negative 7. So if they multiply to a negative, I know we have a positive and we have a negative. I also know since they add up to a negative 7, the bigger one is my negative. So what would that be? Negative 10, positive 3. Negative 10 times 3 is negative 30. Negative 10 plus 3 is negative 7. Since it was an x squared, it breaks into x, so x minus 10, x plus 3. Alright, so it's the same idea every time, you just have to watch your signs a little bit. Okay. Let's go down to number 13. So I am looking for two numbers that multiply to what? Positive 24. But they add to a negative 11. Right. If they multiply to a positive, the signs have to be the same. So it's either two positives or two negatives. Since they add up to a negative, they're both negative. So both of these are going to be subtraction. What two numbers multiply to a 24 and add to negative 11? So 24. You can do 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Which combination works?
3 and 8.
3 and 8. Okay, and we said they have to both be negative. Negative 3 times negative 8 is positive 24. Negative 3 plus negative 8 is negative 11. So it's x minus 3, x minus 8. All right, I want you guys to do number 15. Two numbers, they multiply to a positive, so I know they have the same sign. They add to a negative, so I know they are both negative numbers. It was a y squared, so it breaks into a y. I know they both have to be minus. What multiplies 72 and adds to negative 17? So y minus 9, y minus 8. Okay. Any questions there? So I want to stop here for today. This is, at this point, I pretty much taught you everything that will be on this